Shalom, Laila Tov, Erev Tov, Boker Tov, Shavua Tov, wherever you're at. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Have a good week. This is after Shabbat, and I was supposed to film this earlier, but I've had so many problems with filming, and so I'm just gonna get into this. I did not do any parsha explanations for Toldot or Vayetze. I did do it for Chaye Sarah, and if I'm gonna do that for Chaye Sarah, I've got to do the rest of the parsha. So, something that I learned from social media a while ago was if you know Aleph Bet, then teach Aleph Bet. If you only know Aleph, then teach Aleph. And that is consistent with 1 Corinthians 13, where it talks about us only knowing in part. And that's fine to teach when you only know in part. And I sometimes have hesitancies when you can only teach in part, because if you don't know the whole thing, then it can be deceiving to your students when they're like, but I thought this is what you said. And I mean, I felt that when I'm learning science, where it's like, wait, that's why Q plus W equals delta H. It's because delta H plus delta KE plus delta PE equals Q plus W. I feel like I've been deceived. But here's the thing. I'm gonna take this back to science. Like, I know that there are professors, chemistry teachers out there who have no idea what Antoine's equations are, who have no idea what equations of states are, like van der Waals, Payne-Robinson, Suave-Redlich-Kwong. Like, they don't know what that is. But they know PV equals nRT. And they know that that's not going to be the actual thing, because ideal gases require that physics doesn't happen in physics. Physics doesn't happen in the way that it does. But they teach PV equals nRT because it's a good assumption, and that's what they know. They know Aleph. And knowing equations of state isn't by no way knowing fully Aleph Bet. I think it's still just knowing Aleph, but you are teaching what you know. So that's what I'll be doing right now, even though I don't know everything about Hebrew. I haven't gone through seminary. I haven't studied everything. This little calendar right here, that is my Parsha reading calendar. But like I said, we'll be going over Toldot and Vayetze. So Toldot goes from chapter 25 of Genesis, Genesis 25 verse 19 up until Genesis 28 verse 9, and then Vayetze goes from chapter 28 verse 10 up until chapter 32 verse 3. So for Toldot, these are the main ideas that I want to take away, is that God loves working in impossible situations, which we all know, and then he also has a preference for the younger child, which is kind of contrary to the laws of Moses that you'll see. So in this case, I want to talk about the younger child first before talking about God working in impossible situations. So we're told that this is Isaac and Rebecca's marriage, and Rebecca is barren, and Isaac he pleads with God on behalf of Rebecca, and then she conceives the two nations, the Edomites and the Israelites, right? She conceives Jacob and Esau, and God tells her that they are two nations, and it is through Jacob that the blessing happens. So one will be mightier than the other, and the older will serve the younger. So you see this preferential of the younger several times. You see this with Isaac and Ishmael. You see this with Jacob and Esau. You also see this with Joseph and his brothers, and he's actually like a younger middle child the first time. So all you middle children out there, you can be like, look, we're special. But he's the youngest middle. And then you see that with Moses and Ramses, as also with Moses and his brother and sister Miriam and Aaron. And even though Ramses and Moses weren't fully brothers, you see that Moses was younger than Ramses, and Ramses became the king, the pharaoh of Egypt, while Moses, who was trained up as a prince, became the leader of the Israelites, of the Hebrews. Yeah, the Israelites, that's true. And so, and you also see this with King David, where he is the younger child. the youngest son, and then you can even see it with the tribe of Benjamin, which is the youngest brother of all of Israel. And the out of the smallest tribe in this, the smallest tribe and the smallest clan within the tribe of Benjamin, comes the first king, King Saul, King Shaul, and then through marriage with Michal, King David steps in line to be the king, and he is from the tribe of Judah, and Judah is from Leah, which we will get to in Vayetze. So I think the only person who was like on the dot in accordance to the law of Moses was the law of Moses, and by that I mean, remember for John 1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and the Word is God, and who is that? It is Yeshua, and Yeshua means salvation. So I think because Yeshua, he is the firstborn from the tribe of Judah, and he is the firstborn male, and he is from the Davidic line, so he is like the only one who is like on point with everything. But God likes to make exceptions. I think there was one thing that I read about when counting the Omer, where there are like specific things that look contradictory to each other within the Torah, even just in the Torah alone, not just the whole Bible, but like you're like, wait, that seems inconsistent, and it forces you to look at it, which is like God's way of drawing you in so that you spend more time with him, which I think is an incredible thing to do. Like you're getting your students to spend more time with you, and like, you know, to get to your office hours. That's intelligent. And of course God is the God of intelligence. So with that's just something interesting with you know, the preference of the younger child. But you see in the laws of Moses where it says that the firstborn son will be, in the firstborn of each womb belongs to the Lord, and they'll be consecrated to the Lord. So that's just interesting, where God would take the younger child or the youngest child and set him or her apart. Well, it was him throughout all of the examples that I know of, and set him apart to lead the family. That's just amazing. You even see that with Adonijah in Solomon, or Adonijah in Shlomo, where he was younger, and he's not even the son of the first wife. You see that all the time. So let's go to the parts where God likes to take the impossible situations. So with Abraham and Sarah, this was already impossible. I don't believe that there is phenomenon that isn't explained by science. Like you can make logical arguments for this, and I've seen that from from Yeshiva University of New York, where they have a science journal produced by the Stern College for Women, and so they'll take biblical phenomena and try to explain it with science, and saying like, this is the miracle that happened, like specifically with Leah and Rachel, which you'll see in Vayetze. Actually, for when I talk about Vayetze, but there is phenomenon that happen. You can explain it with science, and knowing that God is the God of thermodynamics, physics, fluid dynamics, all of those things, it can be used to explain what's going on. And just knowing that and seeing where all that is, like, you have to worship God. I have seen God so vividly in science, and it's a way that he hides himself, because if he were to show up in his full glory, we'd all fall dead because we're so sinful. And so he has to hide himself and like give secret messages, because it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings to reveal a matter, and that is somewhere in Proverbs, but I don't know specifically. And you know, he hides himself in there, but it's so vivid. It's like he had to be here. His handprints, his face is like imprinted in there, like a plaster of Paris, where it's a perfect impression of who he is. It's not him, but it's his perfect impression. So, you know, with Sarah conceiving and giving birth, it could be there could have been a spike in her fertility. Maybe something gone wrong with Abraham. Maybe he wasn't able to give enough seed, or his seed wasn't of good quality. And then you see, with them sticking it out with each other, they had been faithful together despite their barrenness. They didn't leave each other in their youth. They had gone through an entire lifetime of not having children, and they stuck with each other because love endures all things, as it says in 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind. It endures all things, and it hopes, right? And so you see Abraham believing so much that that they could have children. Maybe he didn't see it then, but him and staying with Sarah, being faithful to her, and she was beautiful even in their older age. He was afraid of being killed, right? Because he told Pharaoh that Sarah was his sister, which wasn't incorrect. They were half siblings, but like, she was so beautiful, and he didn't want to be killed. And you see that same thing that goes on with Isaac and Rebecca, where he tells Avimelech that Rebecca is his sister. And so this is before any of the sexual sins in Leviticus are being known or being listed. And here you'll see that it is evil. The foreign kings call it evil. And there wasn't even a Jewish nation at this point in Israel. The children of Israel didn't even happen yet. You just have Abraham and Isaac. But you see this with Pharaoh and with Avimelech, that they both see cheating with someone else's wife is evil. And so I thought that was interesting. Like, there were things that were considered evil before they were written, they were codified in law. Anyway, going back to God working in impossible situations, it was already impossible for Sarah and Abraham to have a child. So in this case, Isaac has a legacy of where God answers impossible prayers. So knowing that he was a miracle, and this is a pinhole event for salvation to come into the world, he pleads to God, knowing that he goes, okay, God answered my mom and dad, and perhaps their faithfulness to each other was a silent prayer that God said, I will reward them with a child. And so he did come to them, right? And now Isaac goes to God and says, please, I'm begging you on behalf of my wife, give us children. And God answers them. Now these children are Jacob and Esau, and so the children of Esau, the descendants of Esau, are called the Edomites. Edom means red, and if you remember, Esau had sold his birthright for a bowl of soup, and something about the soup was red, like it was red soup. And so calling them Edomites was a sort of jeer. In my opinion, it's a jeer, saying like, your ancestor blew off his inheritance, his birthright, and so now we're going to call you red soupies from now on because he sold it for red soup. And then the same thing with Jacob, where you'll find that his name also means deceiver. Well, it doesn't. If you're just looking at the same consonants, then yes. But, and I learned this from Rabbi Jacob Rosenberg, PhD, of Adat HaTikva, and he was explaining this, and that Jacob means catching by the heel, but he was going, like, he believed, and he took on that identity that he was a deceiver, and he didn't have to be. He did that switcheroo with Esau, and he got the blessing from their father Isaac, and Esau wanted to kill him, and so he goes to Laban, and the blessing, and the famous blessing is, cursed be they who curse you, and blessed be they who bless you. And let me see right here in Hebrew, let me try to say it. Alecha, Olecha, Alo, Umvarachecha, Baruch. I probably messed that up. I am still working on Hebrew. But you'll see this even throughout history, and I know this from my own personal life with my Jewish friends, that my life is so much better with them when in ways that I cannot explain, other than saying that their blessing is still going through them. Like, I have one friend who has helped me out with so many maths, like thermodynamics assignments, and there was like, and this friend is Jewish, and this is the only friend that had like stuck with me and helped me so immensely through this. And I can see that like my life was blessed because of this friend. And then I have another friend who pours into me so much through her knowledge of the scriptures, and she's Jewish, and my life is so much richer because of that. And so I see the blessing that, you know, it was in deception that this blessing happened, and yet God had still honored it. And he, you know, he didn't try to, God did not rewrite what happened in history, and yet he incorporated it where you could only get such blessing and such a beautiful story be like with this terrible thing that happened. And so God uses those things for his glory, where he goes, okay, that sucked and that was terrible and that shouldn't have happened, but you know what, I'm gonna make something out of this where you praise me because of this, and people will be drawn towards me because of this. And that's just something that's extremely, extremely beautiful. And now, one example from history is the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, where Spain kicked out all their Jews, and then what happened after that? Their economy tanks, and then they lose all of their nations that they conquered. So everyone declared independence from them. Philippines, Mexico, tons of other things. And you'll find that often whenever someone curses Israel, their country's cursed. So it is to our benefit that we bless Israel. Now, let's see. Like I said, Jacob gets Esau's blessing. Esau wants to kill him. His mom says, go to Laban. Wait for your brother to cool off. And so in Vayetze, Jacob, he left for Beersheba. The Vayetze is the beginning of Jacob having that dream of the ladder, Jacob's ladder, right? Where there are angels walking up and down, ascending and descending this ladder from heaven. And then through this, he goes to Laban, he sees Rachel, falls in love with her, he kisses her, and then cries, which is, I think she'd be like, what is going on? This guy is weird. And then Laban, he makes Jacob work for him for 7 years to get Rachel, and he does a switcheroo on him, like he switcherooed on his dad, like Jacob switcherooed on his dad, Laban switcheroos on him, but before this, Laban was still a troublemaker, where he switcheroos Leah, the older daughter, for Rachel instead, and then he, out of his wedding bed, Jacob wakes up and goes, what are you doing? I asked for Rachel. And then Laban, I think this is a lame excuse, where he goes, oh, it's not customary for us to give off the older daughter before the younger daughter. So once her week is over, you get the younger one, but then you're going to work 7 more years. So this guy's swindling him. But here's the thing. Beforehand, Laban, who is the brother of Rebekah, saw that the servant of Abraham brought many expensive gifts in order to find Rebekah and bring her as Isaac's wife. And when he saw these expensive gifts, he's like, stay 10 more days with us. And Abraham's servant said, no, we've got to go. I can't be staying here long. I'm going to fulfill this mission. And I believe that servant was God-fearing completely. He was a very faithful servant. And so what I think Laban is doing is saying, oh, it's not customary for us to do that. I think that's a stupid excuse, because I think he saw that there was so much blessing out of this family, and he already had his sister in this, but I don't think he was able to take any part of that. So he goes, well, if I don't get this, I'm going to get both of my daughters into this family to make sure that I get this blessing too. And so he already recognizes that there was such a blessing on this whole family, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but he does about it in a deceptive way. But even still, God uses this story in order to bring forth salvation. Now, in this, let's actually go to one of the laws of Moses. You are not allowed, it is forbidden for you to take on a woman's sister as a rival wife. Now Moses happened many years after this, but I think this alludes, that specific sin alludes to this story of Leah and Rachel having such tension with each other because they have to share a husband, and not only that, they're sisters. Like, if you go anything about sisters, we hate it when one steals our clothes. Okay, like, why would you steal my clothes? That's the thing. And so now you've got to deal with someone, with a husband too. That's worse. That's absolutely worse. And one thing that stuck out to me with this was just the whole being insatiable, just being insatiable, where Rachel, she was the more loved one, but she didn't have any children, and she was like, her soul was crying out, and she was so sad because of this. And then Leah, who was crying out because, I mean, she was able to have many children, but she wasn't loved. And you know, like, of course she wants to be loved. She's married, and I actually read from Rashi that Esau was supposed to marry Leah because they were both the older children, and then Jacob would have married Rachel because they were the younger ones. But Esau had gotten a Philistine wife, and they bereaved Rebecca and Isaac, and then he's like, oh, actually, these Philistines are bereaving my parents. I see that they want someone from our own family. And we can get in, that's a whole scientific explanation that I can get to. I know it's like disgusting to think about, but my biology professor actually had an explanation for something like that. I'll get into another video on that one. But you see right here that there could have been a PV equals nRT, but we don't. We've got a P over V squared minus AB something blah 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 blah. It could be a Peng-Robinson or a Suave-Reddick-Kwong equation of state, or it could be Uniquac. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. These are very chemical engineering, physical chemistry things that are very involved, and I don't even know what these equations are. I just look at the software and go, yes. But it's basically just taking into account that gases aren't ideal and that they have sticky behaviors, and so you've got to take care of that. And you use that with those very complicated equations. Esau marrying Leah and Jacob marrying Rachel would have been a PV equals nRT ideal situation, but that's not what happened. And yet God still was able to bring about blessing, because from Leah comes the messianic line where you have Judah. So the first was Reuben, and then Simeon, then Levi, and then Judah. And I actually read something with this. Why wasn't the firstborn Reuben? Why wasn't he the one that had the blessing? Well, Reuben slept with I think Bilhah? Reuben slept with one of his, so it was either Leah or Rachel's maidservants. He slept with a maidservant. So he's cut out of that. And then Simeon and Levi killed an entire city of men for raping their sister, even after they had done what they had promised to do in order to marry their sister. That's in another Parsha. And so it's going to be Judah who's the one to carry on this. So he's the fourth oldest, which I think is interesting, because at Passover there are 4 cups of wine, and the 4th cup is the cup of praise, and Judah, means praise. And something else cool with Melchizedek. Melchizedek translates to king of righteousness, and he is a priestly king, and it is from the line of Levi that comes the priesthood. But then there is also the tribe of Judah, from which comes the Davidic line, which is the kings, and so that's just interesting to me, where you've got the 3rd and the 4th. The 3rd cup is the cup of redemption. The 4th cup in Passover is the cup of praise. Hillel also means praise, but Judah, I don't know what the specific nuances are. Y'all can tell me, educate me in the comments, please. But that's just something interesting to me, where like it is uh, through the tribe of Levi, you would have the atonement, the yearly atonement, where the priest basically stands between God and Israel to atone for the sins of Israel. Um, and then yet you've got the messianic line through King David, where the Messiah, the Mashiach, stands before God and the world to atone for our sins. And I'm not saying the whole world, like, it's still your personal choice to accept Yeshua as your Adonai and as your Mashiach. But it's just interesting where it's like the third and then the fourth, and then you see that also third and fourth, redemption and praise. That's another thing. We'll talk about that during Passover. But here in Vayetze, we're going over all the sons that are being produced through Leah and Rachel. And one of the other laws of Moses is that if you have a favorite wife and you have your firstborn comes from the lesser favorite wife, you cannot choose to give more inheritance or the firstborn birthright stuff to the son of your favorite wife. It has to go to your natural firstborn son, which you see in this. So this isn't a like switch up from the law. This is more like a consistency with the laws of Moses, and I think this is alluding to this too, where it's where the Messiah comes from Leah, who was the unloved one. And so that's just what I was, something personally, like I could have all these accomplishments, and I did, and I was so insatiable. Like, I wanted more. Why wasn't this fulfilling me? People tell me I'm pretty all the time, and then I'm like, so why am I single? Blah 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 blah. And I was just, it was terrible to think about that for such a long time, and I couldn't take any compliments, because it's like, yeah, well then how come all those other guys just wait until I'm 3,000 miles away to say something? It was really frustrating. But here's the thing, I started to teach, and then I had so much fulfillment from being a teacher, and all of those, all those things just, those quieted down for a very, very long time. And there was a forced calling for me, I think, but I know that that's what I meant to do, and it's beautiful. And I have seen God work so much through me, and he speaks to me so much through that profession, because he is our rabbi. Yeshua is our rabbi. Rabbi means teacher, and he'll whisper things to me as I'm teaching, and he goes like, you see how frustrated you are? You see how patient you are with the kids? That's how I'm patient with you, and even more so because you're a little piece of who I am. And I'm like, if I'm made in your image, oh my goodness, you're this patient. If I'm this patient with these children, wow, you are so much more patient with me. So that's that was just my understanding, and I know I'm going off a little bit, but what you'll find more here is that Laban, throughout Chayei Sarah and Vayetze, he is just like, he's greedy, and he's causing trouble to this family, and I think it's undue trouble. But without him marrying Leah off first to Jacob, we couldn't have the messianic line. You can't have King David and that whole line. You don't even get the priesthood without Leah. But here's the thing, without Rachel, you don't have Joseph, and Joseph was the one to save Israel, really, to save all of his brothers from famine. And you see that even more. And there's what I learned from a rabbi is that there's no such thing as no connection or insignificance. I think that was from Rabbi Daniel Lapin. There's no such thing as insignificance in the Bible. So you'll see with Joseph, who is the husband of Mary, stepdad of Yeshua, he was told in a dream by the angel Gabriel to take the child and his mother, Yeshua and Miriam, bring them down to Egypt, because there's people who want to kill the child. So he wakes up Mary and Jesus, brings them down to Egypt. to keep them safe, because this is where this is a pinhole event for salvation to happen, right? And you see like the killing of the baby boys, which is also what happened around the time of Moses. It's very much like a Noah event, where like there was so much destruction that happened, and there had to be that little remnant that had to stay. And it seems so cruel for that to happen. And these are things that I don't know how to explain. So perhaps I will understand later on once I get more knowledge. But at this point, I don't know. I really just don't. Just like when I was in high school, I didn't know anything about equations of state, and I still don't understand them completely, but I at least know how to reference them, where to look them up, and how to look them up. But it wasn't wrong for me to only know that PV equals nRT existed up until I got to PV equals Z nRT, and then uniquac and unifac and all sorts of different things, okay? And so, like NRTL, Wilson, Swavre, the Kwong, all those other things. But what was I gonna say with this? You see that with Joseph in Genesis, he was the child of Rachel, who was able to save all of Israel by being that leader and making sure that they were that his brothers and their families were taken care of. And yet it's from Leah that you get the priesthood and the kingly line. And something else with that is, like, you don't have the priests and the kings aren't the same. And this is, I think, the first time you'll find that there is a separation of powers, where, that's a very American thing to think about, where you've got, the House, the Senate, in the legislative branch, you've got the judiciary, and then you've got the executive branch, right? So we see that separation of powers as an American moral is like a good thing, because it keeps us accountable. You see that also in the Bible, where you've got the tribe of Levi, that the Kohanim, and then you've got the kingly line, where the kings, and then you also have the prophets, right? Who may or may not have been part of the tribe of Levi. I'll have to look into that. But I don't see anything in there, none from what I've read, that indicates that they're from the tribes of Levi, or from the tribe of Levi, the Nevi'im, the prophets, I should say. But you'll see that, like, you've got prophets, you've got the kings, and you've got the priests. So these are like the three main powers in here. The prophet keeps the king in check, and then the king being in check with the Levites, and then also the Levites at that time, they are the ones who stand before God and Israel to basically as like a lawyer, saying, ease your sentence, and have mercy. And as God says, and like I think it's in the book of James, Jacob, who is the brother of Jesus, saying that mercy triumphs over judgment, and you'll see that God does that. And so with this, in Vayetze, Laban is still such a thorn, and Jacob tells his wives, like, look, your dad has switched my wages, has changed my wages so many times, we're leaving, we've got to go. And so, with that servant, Abraham's servant back in Chayei Sarah, he was very wise, and he was like, no, I've got to go. I work for someone else. I'm not going to listen to Laban. And as I believe that servant was fearing God completely, I think he had that wisdom, or the discernment to see that this man's going to cause me trouble. Jacob was all heart eyes. He only had heart eyes for Rachel, and he didn't have that discernment, but even still, God had brought blessing that couldn't have happened outside of all of this. So I know this is kind of abrupt for me to end right here. I will get to Vayishlach next week, perhaps tomorrow. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. Actually, I'll read through that just so that you have that ready to think about on Shabbat, the next Shabbat. But you guys, I want to say I enjoy doing this so much. I know this is a longer video, but I hope this blessed you. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing, give it a thumbs up, and let me know what else you'd like to think about or what thoughts you have from this. And I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, wonderful morning, wonderful afternoon, wherever you are. And just know that you can always trust in God, and that I see Him in my own personal life, that He brings me so much blessing even when I don't understand. Sometimes He answers my prayers right away, and sometimes He doesn't answer them at all. Sometimes He does the exact opposite of what I want. But even still, throughout all of them, I know for a fact that I can trust in Hashem. So I hope this blessed you, and all have a wonderful evening, wonderful morning, wonderful wherever you are. All right, bye everyone. Shalom.